to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. Please be seated. The last time I felt truly lost, or that found myself truly lost, was more than 10 years ago. I was hiking through the mountain through Nagorno-Karabakh with a few friends, this little piece of land between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And we had been following for this 200-mile trail these little blue and yellow blazes on trees and telephone poles and rocks and the sides of buildings, pointing us the next way to go, to the next blaze, the next one to lead us from one town to another, over mountains and through valleys, along rivers and along dirt roads. And then one day, in the middle of this trip, we looked for that next blue and yellow blaze, and there was none. We thought maybe we had taken a wrong turn, and so we backtracked a little bit and tried to go another way. Still no blaze. And so we tried another direction, thinking this has to be it. Still no blaze. We realized that we had no idea where the trail went next. There was no one around to ask. There was no way to figure out where we should go. We had no compasses. All we had were these Soviet geological survey maps from sometime in the mid-70s that had a line drawn on them to show where the trail went. So we looked at the maps. We looked at the area in front of us, the string of mountains and this ridge of low hills right in front of us, covered in thick forest. We said, well, got to make it to the other side. And so we set off. And it was this day that was full of arguments between the three of us. One of us thinking, well, we should go up to the ridgeline. Another saying, no, we should skirt along the valley. Another saying, let's follow the stream. It was full of those moments of almost paralyzing anxiousness, of realizing that we had no way to know where exactly we were heading. We had long since lost the way to go back to where we had come from. We looked at the sun as it was starting to get lower. We said, well, I guess we press on ahead. And eventually, after cresting the ridge line, we realized that we probably needed to somehow get to the other side. So we made our way down the mountain. We found a creek which connected to a larger stream, which connected to a river, which finally led us to a dirt road that we could only assume would lead us near to the place where we were actually hoping to go. We followed the dirt road along, and eventually there it was, a blue and yellow blaze. We found our way as the sun started to set to the campground we had hoped to reach that night, and we're delighted to see that they had a cooler of ice cream sitting out front for us to buy and settle into our site for the night. To be truly and physically lost is an increasingly rare thing. Whenever I leave the house, I can plug in a set of coordinates or a destination, and a calming and somewhat robotic voice tells me every single turn that I need to make. Even in the depths of wilderness, I can plug in, I can look at my GPS watch, and it can pinpoint a set of coordinates of where I am located. They make beacons that you can get out a message or call to someone from nearly any point on the face of the earth. And in order to get lost, you almost have to try to do so. Or to forget to charge all of your devices, which has also happened. The parable that we hear today for our gospel reading is a parable about being lost. It's a parable that has, over the centuries and over generations, been assigned the name the parable of the prodigal son. But I think sticking with that name might limit how we read it and how we interpret it. If we look at the context in which it comes as part of a string of 3 parables that Jesus tells. The first of them, was a shepherd who was tending his flock one day and realized that one of the sheep was lost. So he leaves the 99 behind in the field to go chasing after the one, searching high and low everywhere he can think until he finds it. And he slings the sheep over his shoulder and returns to the flock, and they rejoice and celebrate the return of the one single sheep. Next, there's a woman who has 10 silver coins and realizes at some point that she has lost one of them. So she goes through the house, turning everything over, looking in every corner and under every cushion and below all of her furniture and in all the dusty places and every recess in her house, until finally she comes up with the one coin. And instead of being ashamed for having lost it and having had to search for it all this time, instead she calls in all her neighbors and says, "Come and rejoice with me, because what was lost is found." And that brings us to our parable today. It's a parable about a son who demands his inheritance from his father and takes it and goes and wastes it in riotous living, who squanders it on, you can kind of fill in the blanks of the details of what he might have spent that money on. And at some point he realizes that he is lost. In the title, The Parable of the Prodigal Son, kind of looks mostly at his actions, his wasteful spending, his taking his inheritance and blowing it on who knows what. But read in the light of these other parables, we can see that it is a parable about being lost. And so this son, who has gone out and spent all the money his father left to him, eventually finds himself in a faraway land in the midst of a famine, starving and desperate, just wishing that he had eaten some of the tough pods of the carob seeds that he was throwing to the pigs that he was tending. But he comes to himself, realizes just how far afield he has strayed, just how lost he is, and he says, "I will return to my father and will beg him to take me back as one of his servants." And so he makes his way back home, and when he is still a long ways off, his father sees him and rushes out to meet him. We can see that moment enshrined in Rembrandt's painting, where the father rushes out to him and it's literally translated, flings himself on his neck, wraps himself around his son and welcomes him back in. "My son who was dead is alive again. He who was lost, he was lost, and now he is found." And if the parable ended there, it would be another neat and tidy story of someone being lost, something being lost and being found, that which was missing being rejoined, being brought back into the fold of all that remains. But it's a little more complicated than that. We've got another character who enters the scene, the older son, there on the right-hand side of Rembrandt's painting. Here's the festivities, the feast taking place, the music, the singing, the dancing coming from the main house, and wonders what could it all be about. And when he approaches, he sees that his younger brother, the one who abandoned the family years ago, who took half of his father's money and spent it on God knows what, has come back and has been welcomed in. The older brother can only think of all the extra work he's had to do, all of the time that he's spent out there in the fields, as he puts it, working like a slave, contributing to the family, doing what his father wished for him to do, trying to be a good son, never asking for more than was his due, never making any demands. And yet here is this other son who has returned home and has been fully welcomed and embraced. He's having a party thrown in his honor. His father isn't asking questions or dressing him down for all the mistakes he's made. There's no sign of judgment, of harshness. There's no punishment that surely the younger son deserves. And so the older brother refuses to go in, refuses to join in the celebration, refuses to be reunited with his brother, refuses to let the past be the past, refuses to let go of his resentment. And the father comes outside and says to him, "Come, rejoice. Don't worry about all of that. Your brother was dead and is alive, was lost, and now he has found." It's an invitation to come in, to join into the feast, to be reunited, to be reconciled to one another. And we don't get the end of the story. We don't know what decision that older brother made, whether he came in to join the party or whether he stayed outside, choosing to hold on to his resentments and his antagonism towards his brother, instead of simply to accept the grace that his father has decided to show. And this movement and the uncertainty to the end leaves us with a question. Who is the one who is lost? Who is the one who is lost? Well, it may be increasingly difficult to get ourselves physically lost in the world with all the technology available at our fingertips. The experience of being lost is an almost universal one. I think of the times that I felt the most lost in my life. It's not been about not being able to place myself on a map or know how to get to the grocery store or which way to go to find the trail over the next ridge. The times I've felt the most lost have come in moments of transition, those interstices between one life stage and another, those times when I wasn't sure who I was or what I wanted or where I was going or what I wanted out of life, or the times that I felt isolated from friends, from family, or I felt alone. The times I felt the most lost have come after major life events that left me unmoored, searching, uncertain, wondering where to go from there. We see that play out in this parable, that each of the characters feels lost in some significant way. You've got the younger son, the prodigal, who goes out and finds himself literally lost in a faraway country, not sure where to go or what to do, even how he will feed himself. We find a father whose heart is broken at the loss of his younger son, unsure if he will ever see him again, believing that he has disappeared somewhere off in the world, and that relationship is gone forever. And we see an older son who is unable to reconcile with his brother, unable to work through the past, unable to accept the grace that his father has chosen to show, who opts, at least at first, to stand outside, to stay isolated and removed from the family that is ready to receive him in, to welcome him as once again part of a whole. This is a parable about being lost, but it's also a parable about being found. All of the parables that Jesus tells are meant to say something about God and about what it is like in the kingdom of God. And while each of these characters experiences some sense of being lost in this parable, there is also hope of being found. It ends in a hopeful place with the possibility that all will be welcomed into that banquet, that all of them will be reconciled, all of them will be reunited, all of them will find a place there at the table in the house of their Father, that they will sit around the table enjoying this feast of the grain-fed calf, rejoicing in the fact that they are together, rejoicing in the fact that instead of showing judgment and condemning the younger son for what he has done or the older son for his resentments. The father simply stands there and says, "Come in. You are welcome here. I want to embrace you, to bring you close to me." As we see in Rembrandt's painting, where the father is drawing the son into himself. As Rebecca put it in the meditation before the service, almost such that they are becoming one figure. They're so united that there is little separation between the two of them. And in the parable, the father stands ready to embrace the older son in the same way. We worship a God who is seeks to draw us closer, who is in search of us that we might be drawn near. That God might be able to embrace us like this father embraces the younger son, to draw us close, to remind us that we are loved, that there is a place for us at the table, that even when we feel unmoored and directionless, even when we feel lost because of some life transition or some major loss we have experienced, that God is there to embrace us, to remind us that we are exactly where we need to be. We're living in the light of God's love, that God is with us, that we are not alone in everything that we experience, but that God is there ready to receive us, ready to embrace us no matter what we have done or the ways that we've hurt other people or the poor decisions that we've made. God is there. That God's love seeks to embrace us and to hold us, to give a home to us, to welcome us to the table, and say, "You are here and I am here with you." And all that it takes on our part is to receive that love, to say yes to it, to make that choice that the older brother is having such trouble with, to accepting this grace that doesn't operate with any conditions or demands, but is simply there to welcome us in, to embrace us as part of the family of God, united, whole, rejoicing over the finding of any one person, ready to receive them no matter how their life has unfolded or what decisions they have made. And so as we reflect on this passage, on these three folks who find themselves lost in some way or another, may we find ourselves somewhere in that scene, somewhere in which God's light is shining upon us. And may we be willing to receive that embrace, the embrace of the Father for the prodigal son, the embrace that God is ready to wrap us all in. May we feel that love within us, among us, all around us, letting us know that we are not lost, but that we are found. Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. We had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost,